Hello and welcome. Today's topic will not be quite as technical as usually. Recently I was cleaning and repairing some 5-inch floppy drives, one of which is in my daily retro machine, which I use to read, test and copy disks. It suddenly stopped to read floppies properly and just needed a head swipe. But unfortunately I have no cleaning floppy disks, so I had to take the whole drive out of the case to clean the heads with a paper and IPA. Since I often have to deal with disks of unknown origin and condition, the drive heads have to be cleaned regularly, and I was annoyed of taking the drive out of the case every time. For obvious reasons, cleaning floppy disks are hard to find today, so I decided to try to make one myself. Standard cleaning floppy disks look like a usual floppy, but instead of a magnetic disk inside, they have a white disc made of felt or cotton, I don't really know to be honest. And to clean the drive heads, you usually put some IPA in this white disc in the middle, insert the cleaning floppy into the drive and use a cleaning software which moves the head a couple of times over the disc to clean it. So I found this white felt, which I decided to use as a cleaning disc. It is 1 mm thick and should be stiff enough to keep the shape when inserted and rotated in the drive. Now let's talk about the envelope. My first idea was to use a usual floppy. I had some defective disks at hand, which I used for experiments. I opened some of those with a cutter by inserting the blade alongside the wrapped edge. The envelope is welded and my cutting work wasn't as great, but I was able to open the floppies eventually. Inside there is such a thin protective inlay made of felt, and inside of which there is the actual magnetic disc, to which I will come back later. Obviously it would not work if I would put the felt disc directly into the floppy envelope instead of the magnetic disc. Felt is quite abrasive and the cleaning disc would not rotate inside of the envelope. Well, I could just remove the protective inlay completely and try to use the envelope without it. However, the surface of the envelope inside is covered with tiny dots, which are like small needles, which normally would hold the protective inlay in place. Obviously, they also would keep the cleaning disc in place and not allow it to rotate. So I couldn't use a normal floppy disk as an envelope for my cleaning disk. Instead, I decided to try a cardboard. I had some sheets in different colors at home, which should be thin but stiff enough to serve as an envelope. I measured a floppy disk, drew the outline in Inkscape and printed it directly onto the cardboard. The paper was so thick that my printer had issues to pull it into the tray. I had to help a little bit, but the result looked good. The outline was perfectly aligned with the size of a real floppy. After cutting the cardboard to the required shape, it was time to make the actual cleaning disc, and for that I used the magnet disc as a template. To keep everything in shape, first I wanted to use some glue, but eventually decided to go with double-sided tape. The result looked promising. It is important that the felt disk inside would freely rotate, and as you see, it did. Also, the DIY floppy cleaner perfectly mastered the insertion test. Let me show you what happens if we insert a normal floppy disk into the drive. The motor starts to spin as soon as the disk is inserted, and as soon as I close the trigger, the floppy is held in place and the motor stops spinning. The same happened with the DIY floppy cleaner. For the head cleaning run, I used the DOS tool IMD, which also supports this feature. And this is where problems with my DIY cleaning floppy occurred. As you see, the felt disk inside of the floppy didn't rotate during the cleaning operation. I could rotate it manually, turning the spin motor by hand, but I could feel that the friction is slightly too high. The motor wasn't able to turn the disc properly. Even though I could rotate the felt disk easily when the floppy was outside of the drive, it was probably pressed slightly too much together, so the friction of the felt disk against the cardboard was too much. Obviously, cardboard was not the best solution, and I had to find something with less friction. I looked through some stuff which I had at hand and stumbled upon this plastic file. It was a little bit thin for my taste, but therefore it gave me very little friction when rubbing with the felt on it. So I used once again a floppy as a template and repeated the whole procedure with the plastic file instead of a cardboard. Putting everything together went quite easily, and the felt disk inside of the floppy slid this time a lot easier. This was once again very promising, but as I inserted my DIY cleaner into the drive, surprisingly it didn't spin up. Well, this didn't work because this floppy drive has optical sensors which detect an inserted floppy disk. Obviously, a transparent floppy disk is not the best idea in such a case. Unfortunately, I had only transparent files at hand, so I had to improvise, and so I put a piece of black tape in a corner where the optical sensor on this drive is located. As you see, this way it can mimic a real floppy, which is usually not transparent. This taped corner would normally go into this side where the sensor is located. The other corner is still transparent, as you see, so let's turn around the floppy so the transparent part is again located under the optical sensor. As you see, the motor is not spinning. Now let's turn around the cleaning floppy. Now the optical sensor recognizes a disk and the motor is spinning. Nice. Okay, let's add some IPA and see what happens. And yay, it rotates. In the beginning it started slowly, maybe you saw it, but then it gained some speed. Looks like IPA is also working as a lubricant. Interesting, let's try to add some IPA to the cardboard version of the cleaning disc. Maybe it will change something? Nope. It's the same, the friction is just too high, so the motor can't handle it. Well, it's also probably bad for the motor, so I shouldn't repeat it. Looks like the second prototype worked much better. It's not perfect still, but at least it is something working. However, I made some mistakes, which I should avoid next time. Maybe you can see on the edges of the disc there are now black smears. This is because I used a black marker to draw the floppy outline on the plastic. I should have removed those lines before sticking everything together. Now, as soon as I added the IPA, it of course washed away the marker lines and the felt sucked everything into it. This is something to keep in mind for the future. Another thing is to take a non-transparent file to avoid any problems with the optical sensors. For the prototype, this was good enough, but next time I'll buy some color files for it. Well, otherwise, I think this is something useful and I hope you found it useful too. As I said, cleaning floppies are not very common anymore and it's good to have one or two at hand for such repairs. And this is it for today. So far, thank you for watching and goodbye.